So welcome to Workshop Wednesdays. My name is Megan. I am the marketing manager here at Monolith Forensics. If you've never been to a Workshop Wednesdays before, basically what we do is every 2 weeks we do a live webinar on kind of a practical digital forensics concept, just to kind of offer some free education for everybody. So we are going to have time for questions. We do questions live here usually. So if you're comfortable asking your question live over microphone, just raise your hand and we'll give you permission to talk and you can ask your question live over microphone. Or if you prefer, just go ahead and drop your questions in the chat and we'll go ahead and get those answered live for you. So I think that's it for my spiel. So I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Matt.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining again. I apologize for our last webinar. Um, we were at the, Megan, does my audio sound okay?
Sounds okay on my end. Anybody
Okay.
else having issues with echo? If you could just drop it in the chat.
Hey, and Jason, I saw your note there, but you're joined into the meeting twice, just FYI. I don't know if you noticed that or not. That might be where your echo is coming from. So anyway, I apologize for not doing this live 2 weeks ago. Um, I was at the Techno Security Conference in Myrtle Beach, and I did a live presentation at Myrtle Beach that was at the same time as our typical webinar Wednesday. So I had Megan play a recording from a previous presentation I did. So in order to compensate for that, I'm actually going to do the presentation here that I did at Techno so that you guys can see it, and it'll be recorded for later consumption. Um, I think most of you guys know who I am already, but just to introduce myself quickly for anybody who hasn't joined yet, my name is Matt Danner. I'm the CEO and owner of Monolith Forensics, where we make sort of lab evidence case project management software for digital forensics teams. So if you haven't heard of that product before, please go to our website, take a look at it. If it's something you're interested in, just reach out to us and we'll schedule a demo or a trial for you. Um, so today what we're going to talk about is it's sort of an amalgamation of different topics that I've covered throughout other webinars and other presentations, and with a few extra things built in. So if you've been joining my webinars the last few months, we might cover some stuff I've already talked about, but I'm kind of trying to combine them all into one cohesive presentation to kind of see how everything kind of fits together. And hopefully you guys will get to maybe get some ideas or thoughts on doing things a little bit differently. And the core of this presentation of what I'm trying to do is I think the presentation title is the Modern Analyst Toolkit, Why Non-Traditional Tools Matter. And what I'm really trying to say here, that's basically I had AI help me define a good sounding title for Techno. But what I'm really trying to get at is since I became more of a software engineer to start Monolith years and years ago, it's kind of changed how I look at forensics a little bit, in terms of like, there's just a lot of tooling out there that's more engineering related that I think is extremely useful in forensics that maybe hasn't penetrated yet just because, it's not really necessary to be an engineer or really be a strong programmer in forensics, even though it's something that I promote a lot. It's not always necessary. And, usually the off the shelf commercial forensic tools that we use are usually good enough to get our jobs done. Um, but this presentation is kind of based on, well, let's take a look at what options we have if we don't want to use forensic, commercial forensic tools all the time. Like, what other options do we have outside of like open source? And for me, what I always come back to is, well, we do a lot of really interesting stuff in software engineering where we have all these tools that give us access to raw data that lets us interact with data at a raw level or at a low level, where we're constantly working with data sets directly as opposed to through some kind of commercial tool set. So I kind of put this presentation together to try to show some examples and explain some of these concepts to see if they're useful to anybody else. And also, I have some examples of how I've used this stuff in my forensic work in the past, to hopefully give you guys some inspiration and examples. So what I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to share my screen and give me just a moment here so I can share a portion of my screen. Okay. Megan, is that coming through?
Yep, we can see your PowerPoint kind of editor window.
Okay, great. All right. Give me a second here. Okay. So this is you know, I've probably said this before, but I hate PowerPoints, but this is the one and only time I'll try to do a PowerPoint. But it's basically this entire presentation just breaks down to this one slide. These are the things I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to talk about database, like basically using raw databases to help us do forensics, or even this is also helpful if you're doing a lot of e-discovery or if you're doing a lot of work that involves uh, going through data and trying to provide some kind of data set, especially with mobile data, because not all e-discovery tools are great at handling mobile data, and also some custom data like chat applications, things like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about code and specifically using, a combination of Python, JavaScript, and HTML. We're going to cover IDEs, which in engineering is what we call a integrated development environment, which is basically just software that helps us write code. That's basically all it is. The two big ones right now in the ecosystem are VS Code and Cursor. VS Code is a code editor developed by Microsoft that you can download and use for free. And Cursor is a fork of VS Code. So VS Code is technically open source by Microsoft. Cursor is a fork of VS Code where the Cursor team basically took the fork of VS Code and made a code environment that's more native to AI based development. And if you've been paying attention to the news, you may see that you may have noticed that Cursor was actually bought by SpaceX for $60 billion yesterday. So that's the type of industry that we're working with these tools. These are massive engineering industries that are developing these tools for engineering, and they have a lot of use cases and usefulness and utility for forensics. I'm also going to briefly cover container systems, so things like Docker and Podman. And so I'll talk a little bit about what containers are and how they work and how they can be useful. And Docker and Podman are just container management systems or software. They're just two different products that help you manage and create and host containers. And then, of course, we're going to go through the obligatory AI talk a little bit and talk about these different. I'm going to focus specifically on OpenAI and Anthropic because those are the primary two players in the industry right now. But I'm going to briefly weave some AI into all of this stuff that we're talking about. Okay, so to get started, let's talk about databases for a second. So the thing about databases, and something I've run into in my career before, is sometimes I'll have a client, like an attorney, and we'll have some specific type of data set. And I have two examples that I'm going to show here in a minute. So um, you should be able to see my MySQL workbench. So what you're seeing here, I apologize. I know the text is really, really tiny. It's just because this is Workbench and I don't have a zoom increase zoom option for Workbench. But what I've got pulled up here is something called MySQL Workbench, which is basically um, it's basically a user interface that allows you to navigate and access and run operations inside of MySQL. That's all it is. It's just a program that lets you access and manage MySQL databases. And as of right now, I have a MySQL database running inside of Docker. And so this is what I was talking about earlier when I said I'm going to weave all these different concepts together. So right now I'm using Docker on my Mac OS, on my MacBook Pro, and I am running a MySQL instance using Docker right now. I'm also running a few other databases as well, which is part of the power of Docker. Right now, I have this local MySQL database running, and then I can access that database using MySQL Workbench to do queries. I can create tables. I can create custom databases. I can do all kinds of stuff. Basically, everything I need to do in um, in MySQL, I can do through Workbench. There's other tools out there. There's also a tool called Table Plus, which is really good at this, but MySQL Workbench is sort of the native system. So what I've got here is an example. This is an actual real case. So in this case, what we had was instead of getting access to forensic images and data, The only thing that the court would allow us to have was just file lists. So basically, file lists from all the computers, laptops, Google Drive accounts, and a few other systems. So we had, I don't know, maybe a dozen different spreadsheets of just a listing of files and metadata from all these different systems. And the attorneys wanted me to do, whatever kind of forensic analysis I could, and they were feeding me some specific questions about different things. And even though we didn't have the full forensic images, we still had the full file lists with metadata, which was still really useful to do certain things. So instead of like digging through a dozen different spreadsheets and trying to, navigate everything through Excel, what I did was I just created a database with MySQL, and I basically dumped all of that spreadsheet data into a table within this database, and then normalized the data in such a way to where all the data fitted to a few fairly straightforward columns. So here, it's hard to see. I know it's probably small on your screen, but we have here is a table that has a name, path, file type, extension, created, modified, and access column. And so with this is basically now I have a nice database that I can go through and run any kind of queries that I want. And so this is really helpful because now I can do things like if I want to see any file that has a timestamp within a certain range, I can run queries to help me do that. So I can say, okay, show me all files where the created, modified, or access dates and times are between this date and this date, right? You can run that and then see literally everything. And then you can even add sort parameters. So we can order the list once we query it by a certain value so that we can see that data in a certain order. We can also run searches. So like here, this is a basic search query where I'm searching these different columns in data. I'm searching the name and path column for this particular keyword, this invoice keyword. So I can run that query and okay, that's weird. I just ran this a second ago. So why isn't this working? Sorry, a little technical issue here. Okay, it's probably because I'm focused on the wrong database. There we go. Okay, so I had the wrong database selected. There we go. So what I just did was I just ran a simple, what's called a full text index search against the data here because I'm looking for specific keywords. And you can run this with multiple keywords. You can do this. You can even combine this with Python, and you can write your queries from Python and do more complex logic with a Python script and querying this data. So the point is we can use this stuff to write highly customized searches instead of just depending on software to do this for us. Like let's say in this situation with a dozen spreadsheets of file listing data, there wasn't really any off-the-shelf forensic software, at least not that I know. Maybe you guys are aware of some software that would help me do it, but there's nothing that I know of that would help me go through and help me, search through all this data. This is something like 500,000 records across all of those spreadsheets. It might have actually been more than that. But I didn't know of any off-the-shelf software that would help me just go through and write queries and do complex search functions and sorting and things like that off this data. So dumped it all into a database and just used this to go through it. Now, what's also cool about this, we had, in a completely separate case, had a similar scenario where instead of it being a file list, what we actually had was chat messages from an iPhone, so SMS and iMessage, and then also chat messages from WhatsApp. And so in that scenario, the clients or the attorneys had some very specific requests about how to search and provide results from those chat results. So in here, I actually created two different tables. So I created an SMS table and I created a WhatsApp table. And I basically created some queries here to help me search through that data. And so here's an example here where we can run a basic search, full text search against iMessage data or SMS data, and then you get a certain set of results, right? And you can set this search parameter to anything you want. Right now, I've got it set to invoice. And right now, what you're seeing me run a very, very basic search query. This is not the actual query I ran. This is just an example. But what you can do is, let's say that in this case, the attorneys wanted a very specific data set. They wanted me to search all the messages, and they gave me something like 2 or 3 dozen search terms to look for, including complex terms like phrases and combinations, things like that, and Boolean search phrases, things like that. And they wanted the results, but they also wanted a column that told them what search hits were in each message. So that way they could target certain messages with certain search terms. whenever they wanted by looking at the result set, which was basically exported to an Excel spreadsheet. So out of the forensic tools and e-discovery tools that I have, I didn't have anything that would allow me to do that. Maybe I'm sure there's something out there that does it, but I couldn't find anything, and I wasn't willing to go out and like buy a tool just for that one purpose. So did similar to the file listing stuff. I just dumped it all the data into a database in MySQL, and once you learn how to do that, it's actually pretty easy. It's not that hard. And then just create a quick full text index, and then started writing queries to search through this data to find the search results. And then what I actually did in this case was I wrote a Python script that would iterate through all the search results, run the queries, and then basically I implemented a custom tagging system where on the record itself, it would automatically tag a message as to whether it was a search hit or not, and then it would add in the search term that it had a positive hit on. So that way, I could just run this script anytime I wanted, and it would automatically tag and mark the messages that were important, tag them with the search terms that they hit on, and then I had a very easy export to provide to the attorneys as a result. I know this, if you're not used to doing stuff like this, if you're not comfortable with databases, if you're not comfortable with SQL queries, if you're not comfortable with Python, this can seem like a lot of work. But once you've done this and once you kind of learn these skills, honestly, like for most of you, this would probably only take a couple of weeks to pick this stuff up. This stuff actually is not that difficult. And what's great is it gets even easier if you use something like AI to help you do it. Um, so, for example, let me share my screen again. Okay, so you should see that I've got Claude pulled up here. And let's say you're not comfortable with MySQL, but you want to conduct some kind of search across a data set. So what I can do, I have this table here, this SMS table. I can pull up the database schema here. So I'll copy that, and then I'll go back into Claude. I can just say, hey, given this MySQL table, can you show me some example queries to run message keyword searches? And then what I'll do is I'm just going to paste in that table schema, and I'm going to let it run, and it should give me, and basically what it's going to do is it's going to look at that table schema, and then it's going to basically give me a bunch of examples of different SQL queries we can run to do these full text searches. And hopefully this won't take too long. I don't want to waste everybody's time waiting for this to give me a result. But to give you an example of this, our solutions engineer, Andrew, on our team, this is a workflow that he does all the time, not in forensic work, but when we get new customers, we have sometimes a lot of data migration work we have to do where we take case management or evidence data or lab management data they already have, whether it's in spreadsheets or some other products, and then we move it over into migrated into Monolith. And that sometimes takes a lot of database work. And this is a workflow that he uses all the time to basically figure out how do I move or migrate one data set from here over to the database of Monolith. And so he's constantly using this stuff on a regular basis. Okay, why are you taking so long? Is Claude down again? Let's do medium effort and we'll run it again. If this doesn't work, we'll switch over to ChatGPT. Sometimes I've noticed with Claude, they seem to have more downtime than a lot of folks than OpenAI does. Let's try it in ChatGPT. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's finished. All right. So we gave it the table schema and we asked to give us some sample queries, and and it gave us a bunch of different queries that we can use as an example to run. It even gave us some string matching related to date values and that sort of thing. So my point here, all I'm trying to show here is that let's say you're not very strong in SQL or you're just learning it. That's okay. You can take your time, build a table that you need. You can use these AI systems to help you understand how to do this entire process. All you really need to know with AI now, you just need to know kind of like what you're trying to do. And then you can go to AI and help it walk you through the steps to do it. So let's say you're not sure how to install MySQL as a Docker image on your system. That's okay. Just pull up Claude or ChatGPT and just tell it, hey, how do I walk me through? Give me the steps to install Docker on my MacBook and run a MySQL instance, and it will give you the step by step instructions on how to do that. And then say, okay, now I want to construct a table that I can import chat messages into. Like, walk me through the steps of how I should do that, and it will walk you through those steps on how to do that. And so the point is like what I'm trying to get at here is you have all these powerful systems and tools at your disposal that used to be blocked by the fact that it would take forever to just learn how to put all this stuff together. But now when you combine all these different things with AI, you can basically have the AI be this assistant that just basically walks you through how to do this stuff step by step. So anything that you haven't done before, anything that you may have been a little apprehensive in the past to learn or try to figure out, you now have basically a 100x way of learning that stuff where you can significantly compress the amount of time it takes to utilize these different systems that maybe in the past you've been apprehensive about using. And this is what I think we talk a lot about AI in the context of how it helps us review evidence or how it may help us find evidence and all this stuff, the stuff that, the vendors out there are trying to do. They're trying to figure out how to get AI into their products so that it helps you review evidence or something. But I don't know if anybody's really talking about how to use AI to just enhance your own skill set and your own capabilities. As opposed to thinking about how AI is going to make your tool set better, like start thinking about how AI is going to make you better. Like, how's it going to make you better and upgrade the skills that you have or add skills that you don't have that you weren't able to get because you just didn't have time to learn it, or it's just so far outside, something you're interested in that you never picked it up. With something like AI, it can basically make all these more powerful technologies a lot more accessible to you as a user. So just to hop back into MySQL for a second. So right here, we've just got some simple queries that we can run. And again, like you can get the basic query from something like Claude or ChatGPT and then just modify it to your use case. And then just run and just basically do whatever you want with the stuff. Okay. So that kind of covers the database problem. Now, I focused on MySQL because that's just what I have in place. I tend to like MySQL a little bit better because one MySQL database can host, one MySQL instance can host multiple databases. So that means you could theoretically create a new database for every case that you're working on and keep some logical separation of the data. You can do the same thing with Postgres. SQLite is also useful for this case, but the problem with SQLite has its ups and downs. But the downside to SQLite is you create one database and there's just one database. But the upside is it stores everything into a SQLite file, so it's a lot easier to sort of manage and track the data that you're putting inside of a SQLite database. But any one of these is great. You can use AI for each one of these to utilize them. It doesn't really matter. All I'm trying to introduce you to the fact that you can use these databases for your forensic work if you just take some time and leverage AI to help you utilize these systems. So let's talk about code a little bit. And we talk about code, again, this is going to cross over into both the IDE territory and the AI territory, the stuff I'm about to share. If some of you have been coming to my webinars, you'll probably have seen me go through this exercise before. But I'm going to show it again just so that folks that are new to the webinar or maybe missed one of these webinars, haven't seen this yet, you can actually see it in action. But what you're seeing here is I have VS Code opened. And this is VS Code is this code editor. We use it here at the company to write code and work on Monolith and other engineering related things. And honestly, this is probably this is an incredibly powerful system to use. And I think it's something that could be really useful in a forensic context as well. Because what it does is it gives you one program. And if you look at the setup of what this IDE is, over here on the left, we have here is basically just a file explorer. So I have a file explorer here that I can basically, if I create a file here, it's going to show up here. So if I say new file here, I'll say new file.txt. Okay, I've just got a text file. And if I look in my file Finder window here. Here's that new text file. So it's this really cool system where I can have my file explorer here on the left in a pane. I'll just delete that file because I don't need it anymore. And then also down here at the bottom, I have an integrated terminal. So all this terminal is, this is just like the Mac OS terminal. It's just baked into the editor. So I don't have to have a separate terminal application open or anything like that. I can run everything right here inside of the IDE. So if you have Python scripts or other types of programs or binaries or something in some kind of work folder, you can just run them right here in the terminal and see the output immediately. You can even do things like, if this output is creating files and that sort of thing, they will show up here as they're being created. So it just makes this really nice environment where you have these tool sets just baked into the system that you can use when you're running any kind of complex tasks with, if you have a bunch of forensic scripts you're running or things like that. And so in this sort of new AI era of AI engineering, what we also have on the right-hand side is our AI panel. So what you see here is I've got extensions installed in VS Code. I've got the Codex extension, which is basically ChatGPT, and then I've also got the Claude Code extension, which is Anthropic's code editing agent or code writing agent. And I've got them just built right into the editor. So what that means is I don't have to switch over to Claude. I don't have to switch over to ChatGPT or anything. I've just got them built right into the editor so I can use them for anything. Now, typically these are used to write code, but we can use these for forensic tasks as well. We can use them to, analyze data sets. We can use them to create Python scripts for us. We can do a lot of stuff. So in this example, what I'm going to do, I've shown this before, but I'm going to just do a simple demonstration of of a way that you can use these agents within an editor like this. So what I have here is a sample messages.json, which are just some fake text messages. It's only, it's a couple dozen fake text messages that have basic text message data. And let's say that I want to put this into some kind of demonstrative that an attorney can use or that an investigator can use to make it easier for them to review this data. Let's say that you really don't like the exports that your forensic tools give you, whether it's a Celebrite export or an Axiom export or anything else. You just want something a lot simpler, more clean, something easy for detectives, investigators, attorneys to review. Well, what I could do is here in Codex, I'm going to attach this sample message.json to the chat box here. And then I give it a prompt that just says, can you create an HTML report that contains the messages in this JSON file? Please style the HTML report so that it looks like a typical iPhone Messages app UI. This is intended to be used for review and as a demonstrative to other users. So I'm going to run this, and this sometimes takes a minute or two to run. But what I have here as an example, and I've done this demonstration a few different times, so I've got a few examples of the results here. So here is one example here that I did recently where it generated this report, and you can see we've got a little summary box here on the left, and then we have an iPhone sort of page on the right. And you can even see there's some interactivity with it as I hover over these things. You can see messages and little metadata timestamps, that sort of thing. And you'll notice too that the length of the messages just kind of makes the iPhone super long, which is a little weird. But you can change that iteratively if you want. This is what another one looks like. And so here you're seeing same messages again. I just generated this report at a different time. And again, you're getting something similar. Here it doesn't have that summary box with the metrics or anything. But now we get something where the scroll bar actually scrolls within this container as opposed to just scrolling down through the page. But you get the same result. You get the messages in a nice, clean, easy to read format. This is something that people that are not in the tech world will find a lot easier to review and a lot easier to see. And then finally, we have this one. I think this is the one that I generated at Techno when I did this live in person. And this is probably one of the better ones that we've done that it's generated, where we get a nice iPhone display on the left. Obviously, it's not proportional. It's a little too long. But we get this nice scroll bar inside. So the point is you're getting something that looks like a native. This is what people are used to seeing when they look at text messages. So this makes it easier for them to review and demonstrate. So if they're pulling this into court, they can show this and it makes a lot more sense to the jury. If they're just reviewing it, this makes it a lot more simple to review. Now, keep in mind, this isn't great for like if you have something that has 10,000 text messages, this isn't great. And also, this is just one conversation. So you'd have to do a little bit more complex work if you wanted to batch, multiple different chat threads or chat sessions into a report like this. You'd have to give a little bit more prompt information to the AI and also have a different data set where the messages are grouped by chat session or chat conversation. So you probably get a little different result. But the point is, if you could do it like this for just one chat message conversation, then it should be able to do it for multiple, and you can get a different review set for that. Let's take a look at. So it's still editing. So what you can see here is it's already created our report, and it's doing another pass. So it's created the basic report so far, and it's just kind of doing its last review. And let's see, it's just doing some last checks and edits. We'll just give that a second. It should be finished any second now. And then as soon as it's done, okay, great. It is good to go. So I'm gonna open this baby up and let's see what result we got. Okay, so this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've generated it. This is the one we just did live here on the webinar. And you can see we got something similar, but it's a little different. Again, we've got this table. It added this table of records that has the different messages, but then it also has the iPhone view, which is a little redundant. So this highlights an important part of using AI for this stuff, where I more or less used the same prompts for each one of these report generation processes, and it gave me a slightly different result every single time. And so this is important to know because it just means that a simple prompt sometimes isn't good enough. Sometimes you need to give it a very specific prompt where you give it very specific instructions on how to structure the report, how to lay out the data, how you want the data to be shown. And let's say this result here, I don't like it. I don't want this table. I just want the phone, and I don't want the phone to be super long like this. I could just reprompt it here. I could just literally in the same chat thread, I can say, hey, this is great, but I don't want the table. And I could give it more instructions on how to iterate on this report until I get something that I like. And the point is that I didn't do anything, right? All I have is just some sample message data, and I just gave it a very simple prompt, and this is the result that we got. And this is just an example, but you can do this with just about anything. You just have to be kind of creative and think about how you can leverage AI to help you do things like this. So the first downside to this is just the variability in that these AI systems are non-determinate. So they're just probabilistically generating stuff like this. So it's harder to contain and get a consistent result. But if you like a result that you get, let's say you iterate on this report and get a report that you really like, and you want to make it more concrete so that you can just generate that report every time, what you would do is you would tell the AI, is like, hey, this is great. Now, can you take this HTML report and generate a Python script that will take in this chat message data and generate this HTML report every time I run that script. And what that will do is the AI will then basically set this report structure. It'll make it concrete inside of a Python script. So if we look at this report, this HTML document, what you'll see is that the data is just hard coded right into the script. And what we want it to do is we want to have a Python script that will take the data and then generate that same exact HTML report every single time. And you can do this without knowing how to write any code. Like, you don't need to know Python to do this. You just tell the script to do it. All you need to know is how to write a Python script. That's it. So if you're not strong in writing code or strong in writing Python, that's okay. You just have the coding agent do it for you, and then you can have this result. And you could do this process with just about anything. This is an example of creating a messages report, but if there's other things you want to do, you can use these agents to help you do it. The other reason you want to do this with Python instead is because the way I just did this, and I'll make this clear, really don't do what I just did. You can do this, but don't do it with real data or evidence, because what will happen is, in order for Codex to run this process, it basically had to upload and read the structure and data that's in these sample messages. It had to upload it to OpenAI servers. So in order to avoid sending client data or confidential information or data to a third-party data processor like OpenAI, what you want to do is create a sample set with fake information, fake messages, but in the same exact orientation and shape as your actual evidentiary data. Let the AI process the sample data, the fake data, and then you codify that into a Python script and then just run the Python script over your actual evidence to get the result that you want. So it's a multi-step process, but that's how you can use AI, because there's a lot of talk in the AI world about not using AI and exposing data AI and LLMs and that sort of thing. Well, if you're smart about it, you can structure your process in such a way that you don't have to worry about that. Because at the end of the day, all it matters is that the AI knows what data, what type of data, and what shape and form of data that you're working with. And then you can basically have it work on sample data or example data, get the result that you want, and then codify it into a Python script. And then that Python script can run locally and work with the data that you actually have that's evidence data without ever sending it outside to a third party. So that's how we do this. And again, just to be clear, this I'm not saying that you should be generating reports like this with messages, but what I'm trying to do is use this as an example to inspire you guys to see how AI can be used in these ways to help you do different things and solve different problems without always having to just rely on the commercial tools that you have available to you. Okay. And keep in mind too, most of the stuff other than like a Codex subscription or a Claude subscription, all this stuff that I'm showing you is all basically free. Like there's nothing other than the AI subscriptions, there's nothing here that costs money. All these different tools, the databases, Docker, Podman, VS Code, all these things are just free tools that you can get right now without paying a dime. Okay. So that covers our IDEs and our code. So let's talk a little bit about containers. And this will be the more brief section. I have a different webinar where I've talked more in depth about containerization and Docker. But here we're just going to cover it really briefly just to kind of wrap things up. But basically, so you should see my Docker test desktop that's running. So this application is called Docker Desktop. It's running on my MacBook Pro right now. All of this is just it's just a user interface, just an application that gives you a nice point and click interface to managing Docker on macOS. So really, Docker is just a background process that's running. It's just a background service that's running on my system. So I can do things like I can run Docker stats here in the command line, and I get an output. Because all that Docker is just a service that's running in the background, whether it's on Windows or Mac OS or Linux or whatever. Docker Desktop is just an application that gives me a nice user interface to interact with that service that's running in the background. And so right now you can see I'm running these 3 different containers here. And if I pull up my command line system, I can do things like Docker container ls, which is a command to say list the containers that are on this system. And you can see I've got this MariaDB and this MySQL instance that are running, which matches what we're seeing here at Docker Desktop. I've got this MariaDB and MySQL instance running here on Docker on my Mac OS. Now, you're probably asking, well, how does this relate to forensics? How is this important? Well, the common example I use a lot is if you've ever been to SANS training, if you've ever been to like the SANS, like their most popular basic forensic analysis training course, I think it's 504. They will introduce you to Plazo and log to timeline, which is basically just this gigantic parsing system where you point it at a forensic image, and then like a billion hours later, it results in a giant parsed data set of data that you can use for analysis. And what's great is for the longest time, for a long time ago, they stopped making binaries on Windows because of they added some feature and it required a specific library that only lives in Unix systems or something. And so they couldn't compile builds for Windows anymore. So they just stopped making Windows builds. So for the longest time, you couldn't run long to timeline or Plazo on Windows. You can only run it on like Mac OS or Linux. So that made it really kind of difficult to use because most of us are running on Windows. But the way this got solved was somebody built a Docker image with log to timeline. I think this might be the official Docker image here. So what we're at here is this is on Docker Hub, and we're seeing, I think, what is the official log to timeline Plazo Docker image. And so what this means is that now you don't have to, it doesn't matter what you run this on. As long as you have Docker running on a host system, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever the case may be, you can run this log to timeline process. And what's great is it runs just like the actual binary that we used to run. You just run it through Docker instead of running it locally as a binary on your system. And it's basically simple. The only thing that's bad about this is their documentation on how to use it with Docker kind of sucks. So it's not great, but there is let me pull up again, another win for AI. If you can't find good documentation on something, don't know how something works, great. Just go to Claude or ChatGPT and ask it. So here, can you walk me through how to use block to timeline Docker image to process a forensic image? And then it gives you all this great stuff. And then what I did was at the end of this prompt, I said, hey, can you take all the documentation on how to use this in Docker and just put it into a markdown file? And so that's what I did. And then I copied it here. And now I've got this nice clean markdown file that gives me all the different ways in which I can use log to timeline with Docker so that I can use it to process forensic images, forensic data, whatever the case may be, and get a nice timeline data set output. And so this is kind of the primary use case for Docker is that if you're somebody that likes to build your own tools, you like to do open source stuff, you like to write a lot of Python scripts, things like that, you can package those Python scripts or those utilities into Docker images like they did here with Locked Timeline, and then post it to Docker Hub and then make it easy to share with anybody. And what's so great about it, the reason I'm focusing on Docker is because you don't need any dependencies. You don't need a specific version of Python. You don't need any of that. All you need is Docker installed. And then somebody can make a Python script with Python 1 and have a bunch of weird external libraries that are running with it. And in the past, if you wanted to run that Python script, you had to run the exact version of Python you needed. You had to make sure you installed all the dependencies that were required. And it was kind of a pain in the ass process. But now with Docker, the author of that Python script can package all of that stuff into a Docker image. You just download the image and run it as a container, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to care about the version of Python. You don't have to care about the dependencies it requires. It's all baked into the Docker image that you run as a container. So it just simplifies the whole process, and it makes it to where any like utility or open source tool, anything you use is instantly cross-platform. All you have to have is Docker running on the host system, whether it's Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. And suddenly you can run any open source utility or script that you want, as long as it's in a Docker image. And so Log to Timeline is a good example of that, where just to reiterate, I know I'm going to repeat myself, but this shows a perfect example of why Docker is useful because, like I said, for the longest time, you couldn't run Log to Timeline on Windows anymore because they stopped compiling Windows binaries for Log to Timeline. But now, because of Docker, you can run Log to Timeline on Windows again. It's fine. You just because all the binaries, all the things that it needs are baked into that Docker image within the Log to Timeline image. So now you've got Windows functionality again for this thing that for years could only be run on Unix-based systems. So it's something I highly encourage you looking into and kind of digging into. And again, all these different systems, if you're not familiar with them, just to wrap things up here, if you're not familiar with them, that's why this AI section here is at the bottom, because you can basically use AI to tell you how to use these different systems if you're not familiar with them already. If you're not sure of where to get this stuff or how to install it or how to run it or how to set it up or configure it, you just iterate with AI and have AI basically walk you through the process and steps, or even have it explain to you like an instructor how to use these different systems and how to implement them. So I strongly, strongly encourage this. I think just to put my future cap on here, I think this is kind of going to be the future of a lot of application work in forensics. I think, we went through this period of where, we've been very reliant on commercial tooling to parse data for us, where we're like, okay, there's this data set on this forensic image. I don't know how to parse it. There isn't a parser, so we'll wait for one of the vendors to come out with a feature or a parsing utility for this data. And I think going forward, because of what AI is allowing us to do, what it's unlocking for us, we don't have to wait for vendors to build tools for us anymore. In the past, it was either somebody who knew how to program or knew how to write code would maybe write an open source utility or something, throw it up on GitHub, and then we'd use it. Now, with AI and how good AI is at writing code and examining data and teaching us how to do things, we can just about anybody can now write open source tools or utilities, or just write them for yourself. You don't even have to share them. Just have AI help you build utilities for yourself that you use to solve these little problems that you come up that you run into when you're doing your forensic work. So I'll wrap it up there. Hopefully I hope this was useful. This was more of a conceptual presentation. I know I've talked about some of these concepts before in previous webinars, so hopefully I apologize if some of this is repeated. But this is basically the presentation I did at Techno. I did it live with no recording, so I wanted to share with you guys. And I'll probably do this presentation a few more times in different places as well. But hopefully you guys got something out of it and learned something. Hopefully this is useful. And I'll pause it there and see if we have any Q&A to get to.
All right, cool. We did have one question come through the chat. If you have questions, if you want to come on and ask your question live over microphone, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll give you permission to turn your microphone on. You can ask us live. Otherwise, feel free to drop it in the chat. The question we have in the chat is would you be able to link attachments in the HTML file? So this was related to the coding IDEs section.
Yes, you can. You absolutely can. You just have to kind of tell it. Again, in the prompts, you kind of have to let it know, hey, there's this file that I have here. Like, let's say it's a PDF document or something. Can you put a section in the report that's called linked documents or something, and then create HTML links to these local files? It will absolutely do that for you. The thing to keep in mind, though, is just with these HTML reports, whenever you package it and send it to somebody, you have to make sure those files come along with it. So probably put it into a zip file or something once the report is created.
All right, cool. Anybody else have questions? All right, looks like that is it for questions.
Okay,
All
cool.
right, cool.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt. You're welcome. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Megan. We'll wrap it up there.
All righty, thanks everybody for coming today. Hope you enjoyed the session. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another one of these on a different topic. And hope you guys have a great rest of your week and a couple of weeks in the meantime. Have a great rest of your day.